Welcome back to our deep dive into Darringmoor. Last time we were exploring the city's history, its districts, and its people. Now let's zoom in and really get up close and personal with some of the details that make Darringmoor so unique.
Sounds good to me. So where should we start? I'm dying to hear more about that elven enclave in Faradel's Eyrie. Imagine 200 elves living right in the heart of a human city. It's like a little piece of another world just tucked away in the hills.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. And a little bit mysterious, too. They've kept to themselves for the most part. They maintain their own customs and traditions. The source material mentions that they fled Lysiria during the Third War of Tears, but it doesn't really go into much detail about what their lives are like in Darringmoor.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What is it like to be an elf living in a human city? Are they homesick for their homeland? Are they wary of their human neighbors? It really adds a whole other layer of intrigue to Darringmoor.
Absolutely. And speaking of intrigue, we can't forget about the city's underbelly.
Oh, yeah.
We talked briefly about Queen Mama and her Thieves Guild last time.
Right.
Remember, she runs her operation from above a tavern called the Sail's End in Dockshore North. Talk about hiding in plain sight.
It's brilliant. Who would suspect a criminal mastermind is operating above a rowdy tavern? I bet the drinks are cheap, and the information is even cheaper. But what's the guild like? Is it all cutthroat and ruthless? Or is there some kind of code among these thieves?
Well, the source material actually lays out 12 rules that govern the Darringmoor Thieves Guild. And some rules, like the one forbidding harm to fellow guild members, that suggests a degree of camaraderie and loyalty.
So there's honor among thieves, at least to a point.
Right, but then you have these rules with some pretty harsh punishments. For example, anyone who defrauds the guild faces getting their ears and nose slit.
Yikes. That's a pretty strong deterrent to skimming off the top. It seems like Queen Mama rules with a firm hand.
And then there's this intriguing rule that mentions putting aside any personal objections in times of crisis.
Crisis. Well,
Now, what kind of crisis could unite a group of such independent-minded thieves? It makes you wonder what kind of event might unfold that would require the full force of the Thieves Guild to act.
maybe a rival guild trying to muscle in on their territory, or perhaps a threat to the city itself that even the criminals have a stake in protecting. It's definitely a thread I'd love to pull on more.
I agree. But let's move on from the shadowy underworld for now.
Okay.
I'm curious to learn a little bit more about the everyday folks who make Darringmoor tick. We know that it's a port city, a trading hub, but what are some of the specific businesses and professions that kind of contribute to its unique character?
Okay, so we're stepping out of the dark alleys and into the bustling streets. What should we look for?
Well, if you're in the Kellic Bay ward and you're craving some fish, look no further than Fechtber's stall.
Okay.
He's cornered the market on preparing and selling cod and herring. It's a family business that's been going strong for over a century.
100 years of fishmongering. I wonder if they have a secret family recipe for the perfect fried cod.
It's possible.
Yeah.
But Fechtber's not the only fish in the sea, so to speak.
Oh, who else is there?
Well, there's Bytram Keith. He's a Euceron merchant who specializes in selling shashliv. It's this popular street food that's made with fish spices and sauce.
Street food always adds to the vibrancy of a city. It's like a little taste of the local culture. But speaking of competition, the source material mentions some bad blood between Bytram and the Renfern brothers, who have a monopoly on selling fish in Dimside. It sounds like they're not afraid to play dirty to protect their turf.
No, they're not. Bytram tried to sell his shashliv in Dimside a few times, and the brothers literally chased him off. There are even some rumors that they hired someone to torch his warehouse.
Wow, from fishmongering to arson, that's quite the escalation. It sounds like the Renfern brothers are not to be messed with.
Definitely not. It makes you wonder what lengths they would go to protect their business interests.
Yeah. It makes you realize that even in a city facing these huge threats like the undead and the dimensional instability, that there are still very human conflicts playing out. People are just trying to make a living, provide for their families, and sometimes that leads to some shady dealings.
Absolutely. And speaking of shady dealings, remember that woodcarver whose wife disappeared?
Vanthel Bard.
Yeah.
Of course, I was just thinking about that. Any new leads on his wife's disappearance?
Well, we learned that his wife Neela vanished after she went to the docks to pay for a shipment of wood.
Right.
Could it be a robbery gone wrong? Or is there something more sinister at play?
And what about that jealous sister Flectine? Could she be involved? It's like a classic mystery novel just waiting to be written.
It does, doesn't it? But let's move on to a different kind of mystery.
Okay.
I'm fascinated by this mention of a gnome named Ellytinkin Sneak Hill, Drystar, Caesari Tass Winder, Pansy Pebblefall, Pitung Shipprint Twin Furbling.
Wow, that's a mouthful. What does she do?
She's a rogue and a wizard, and she runs Ellie's Printery and wondrous items in the market district. Apparently, she adds a new name for every magical item that she creates. But here's the kicker. She's also a bit of a rabble-rouser. She's known for criticizing the city's elite in her newspaper, the Darringmoor Dart.
A gnome who makes magical items, runs a printing press, and publishes a muckraking newspaper. She sounds like a force of nature.
She does. And if you're looking for something a little more offbeat, you might want to visit Spindlethrift's Curio Shop in the Barracks Ward. It's owned by Lawrence Spindlethrift. He's a local historian who literally wrote the book on Darringmoor's dark secrets.
His shop must be amazing. What kind of treasures does he have tucked away?
Think ancient artifacts, bizarre trinkets, and maybe even a few cursed objects for good measure. It sounds like the perfect place to find a unique souvenir or uncover a hidden clue to one of Darringmoor's many mysteries.
I am definitely adding that to my list. But let's talk about the more practical side of life in Darringmoor. How do people get around?
Well, if you have a coin to spare, you can hire a carriage from Naren's Carriages in the Solace Domain. They even offer day trips to some nearby villages. Imagine a relaxing carriage ride through the countryside.
Sounds lovely, but what if you're on a tighter budget? Are there public transportation options?
Yeah, the source material mentions a ferry that operates out of the docks, transporting people and goods across Darringmoor Bay. Imagine the salty breeze in your hair, the smell of the sea, the cries of gulls overhead.
It's like a little mini vacation right there in the city. I love how much thought went into all these details. It really brings Darringmoor to life. But what about communication? How do people stay connected in a world without smartphones?
Ah, that's where the Keswick Couriers come in. They're based in Westgate, and they have this network of writers who deliver messages throughout the region. And here's the best part. They use trained, twin-tailed falcons to carry those messages.
Twin-tailed falcons. That's incredible. Imagine getting a message delivered by a majestic bird of prey. It's so much more romantic than an email, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. And speaking of romantic, we can't forget about the love story that's brewing in Tallheart.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more.
Remember Dishargan Nolanhand, the current owner of Tallheart's house? He's searching for a bride, but not just any bride. He wants one who's tall and can appreciate the unique charms of his unusually proportioned home.
I'm rooting for him. I wonder if he'll find someone who sees the beauty in those extra tall doorways. It makes me wonder if there's some significance to the height requirement. Is he hoping to find someone who's descended from the legendary Tallheart?
That's a great question. Maybe he's subconsciously drawn to women who embody the same kind of spirit of strength and independence as the woman who built his home.
It's fun to speculate. But before we get too carried away with romantic daydreams, let's remember that Darringmoor isn't all sunshine and roses. There's a darker side to the city, too. What are some of the dangers lurking in the shadows?
Well, aside from that looming threat of the undead and that shadowy Cirith cult, there have been some pretty disturbing incidents. The source material mentions the death of a shipwright named R. Fallon, who was found hanging in his warehouse in Dockshore North. And a note that was found on his body suggests foul play, but the circumstances surrounding his death remain a mystery.
A murder mystery in the docks. I wouldn't be surprised if Queen Mama knows something about that.
And then there's the case of Dan de Curio. He's this wealthy merchant in the barracks ward who's being blackmailed over his many affairs. And he's desperate to uncover his tormentor's identity.
Scandal in the upper class. It seems Darringmoor has its fair share of secrets and intrigue no matter where you look.
It does. And those secrets extend beyond the human element. Darringmoor is teeming with all sorts of unique creatures and plants. For example, in the South Cliff Ward, there's the Whispering Pond.
Oh, yeah.
And it's home to a species of eel that can grow up to 8 feet long.
8 feet? That's longer than I am tall. I can just imagine the stories the fishermen tell about those eels. Are they dangerous?
Well, the source material doesn't say explicitly, but it does mention that the pond is named for the low murmurs of conversation that often drift across its waters.
The Whispering Pond. It's such a beautiful name, but also a little eerie. It's like the pond itself is holding on to secrets. What do you think those whispers might be saying?
Maybe tales of love and loss, rumors of scandal and intrigue, or maybe whispers of ancient magic and hidden dangers. It's a place that really sparks the imagination.
It definitely does. And speaking of sparking the imagination, we can't forget about those twin-tailed falcons. Imagine soaring through the skies above Darringmoor, these majestic birds carrying messages between distant towns and villages. They add such a sense of wonder and adventure to the city. Where can we find these falcons?
Well, the source material mentions Falcon Common in Roldry Heights Ward. It's this natural area where the falcons nest.
I'm starting to picture Darringmoor as this really amazing blend of urban and natural beauty. You've got the bustling markets and the towering buildings, but then you also have these ancient forests and serene ponds and those soaring falcons.
Exactly. It's a city that's really in harmony with its natural surroundings, even with the threat of the undead kind of looming. And
Hmm.
speaking of harmony, remember those stonewood trees that we talked about earlier?
The ones that they use to make that incredible armor?
Yeah.
Of course.
Well, the source material mentions a stonewood nursery in Holy North, where seedlings are carefully cultivated.
It's amazing how important these trees are to Darringmoor. From construction to craftsmanship, it's like they're woven into the very fabric of the city. And speaking of woven fabric, let's not forget about Darringmoor's artistic side. We talked about Silvertongue, the five-time champion storyteller, but what other artistic expressions can we find in the city?
Well, there's Ferdil Galando. He was this renowned sculptor from the
Oh,
mid-1600s.
wow.
Yeah, he was commissioned to create sculptures for the cemetery in Holy North, and some of his work can be found in other parts of the city, like the Sisters of Solace Hospice.
A sculptor who adorned both tombs and places of healing. That's fascinating. It suggests a reverence for both life and death, a recognition of the beauty and fragility of existence.
You've hit the nail on the head. It seems the people of Darringmoor, even with all the challenges that they face, they haven't lost their appreciation for beauty art and the simple joys of life.
It's really inspiring, isn't it? They've created a city that embraces both the mundane and the magical, a place where commerce and faith intertwine and where the whispers of the past echo through the present.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
I think we've done a great job of painting a really vivid picture of Darringmoor,
Yeah.
from its grandest heights to its darkest depths.
We've met codfish kings and shadowy thieves and even a gnome with an impossibly long name, but there's still so much more to explore. When we return, we'll be delving into the remaining mysteries of Darringmoor. We'll uncover the political tensions that are simmering beneath the surface and maybe even speculate on the future of this extraordinary city. Don't go anywhere.